Let me tell you something right now. There are no accidents. You didn't stumble on this by chance. You're here for a reason, and that reason is one word: change. Change doesn't come when it's convenient. It doesn't arrive with a knock on the door asking if now's a good time. Change shows up when you're finally sick and tired of your own excuses. When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of stepping into the unknown. You're not here because life is easy. You're here because something inside of you knows it's time for more. You're not broken. You're becoming. And the difference between the people who stay stuck and the ones who rise, it's not talent, it's not luck, it's a decision. A decision that says, I will no longer tolerate a life that's beneath who I was born to be. You see, most people wait. They wait for the right time, the perfect plan, or for fear to magically disappear. But what if I told you, you don't need confidence to begin. You need courage. Confidence is what you build after you've dared to act, after you've been knocked down and chosen to rise again. Right now, your mind might be telling you all the reasons you can't, but your soul is screaming something different. It's whispering, it's time. Time to let go of this story that's been running your life. Time to rewrite the script, not tomorrow, not next week, now. Listen closely. Change doesn't require perfection, it requires movement. One step, one breath, one bold moment where you say, enough, enough settling, enough hiding, enough playing small to fit into a life that doesn't light you up. You're not here just to survive. You're here to lead, to love, to grow, to give. But that version of you, the one who's bold, unshakable, unstoppable, you won't meet them standing still. Don't you remember this moment? Because someday you'll look back and say, that was it. That was the moment I stopped waiting and started becoming. You're not too late, you're right on time, and the version of you that's been waiting on the other side of fear, they're ready. The only question is, are you? Change begins when the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of change. That's the truth most people avoid. Not because they don't want better, but because they've learned to tolerate less. We all have thresholds for pain, and over time we build up a tolerance for discomfort, for mediocrity, for disappointment. We tell ourselves, it's not that bad, or I can handle it. And so we stay. We stay in jobs that drain us, relationships that suffocate us, habits that destroy us, because it's familiar. And the familiar feels safe, even when it's slowly killing who we are inside. But there comes a moment, sometimes sudden, sometimes after years, when something cracks. Maybe it's the sleepless nights, the anxiety that just won't leave. Maybe it's the way you look at yourself in the mirror and no longer recognize the person staring back. Or maybe it's subtle, like a voice inside whispering, this isn't it. This isn't who you were meant to be. That moment, that crack, is the beginning of change. See, change doesn't begin when things are good. It doesn't start when life is comfortable. That's not when people make real shifts. Real change begins when the suffering becomes unbearable, when pretending everything is fine is more painful than admitting everything is not. It begins when the illusion of comfort breaks, when the mask slips and the truth stares you down. You're not living. You're existing. That pain, that's your wake-up call. It's not there to hurt you, it's there to move you. Pain is the most honest teacher you'll ever have. It doesn't lie. It doesn't sugarcoat. It doesn't care about your excuses. It just sits with you, waiting for you to listen, to stop numbing, to stop avoiding, and finally say, I can't do this anymore. People don't change just because someone tells them to. They change because they hit a wall. They reach a point where the life they've been living is no longer acceptable. And in that space, in that raw, honest, vulnerable space, they decide. They don't always know what's next, and they don't always have a plan, but they know they can't go back. And that decision, that's power. Because when you reach that place where going backward is more painful than facing the unknown, you step into a new kind of freedom. It's not comfortable. Change never is. Growth stretches you. It challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is regret. And regret is the heaviest thing you will ever carry. There are people walking around today burdened not by what they did, but by what they didn't do. By the chances they didn't take, the conversations they avoided, the dreams they buried. They stayed because they were scared. They stayed because it felt easier. And now they live with the weight of wondering what could have been. The good news, you don't have to be one of them. You don't have to wait until everything falls apart. You can choose to feel the pain now, not to suffer, but to use it. Let it sharpen your vision. Let it remind you of who you were before you settled. Let it ignite something that's been buried under years of playing small. Because the moment you say, this isn't enough for me anymore, is the moment your life starts to shift. The pain of staying the same will never go away. It will grow louder, heavier, more consuming, until one day it demands to be heard. And if you're listening closely, you'll realize that pain isn't the enemy, it's the beginning. You don't need confidence to start, just courage. It's one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves, that we have to feel ready, feel certain, feel strong before we take the leap. We wait for confidence like it's a train arriving at a station, thinking, once I feel ready, I'll begin. But that train doesn't come. Because confidence isn't what you start with, it's what you build. It's not a prerequisite, it's a product of action, of experience, of falling and rising and realizing you're stronger than you thought. Courage is different. Courage is raw. It shows up when everything in you is shaking, when your thoughts are loud with doubt, but you take the step anyway. That's courage. It's choosing to move when you don't know how it will end. It's saying yes when fear is screaming no. It's walking into the fire, not because you know you'll make it through, but because something inside you says you have to try. Most people think successful people are fearless. That's not true. The most powerful people you admire didn't start fearless, they started afraid. They felt the fear, the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, and they acted anyway. That first action, no matter how small, is where everything begins. Because courage doesn't ask for proof. It doesn't ask for guarantees. Courage is the voice that says, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm doing it anyway. The danger of waiting for confidence is that you might never move. And the longer you wait, the louder the doubts get. You rehearse every worst case scenario, every way you might fail, and you talk yourself out of your own potential. But here's what happens when you act with courage. The fear doesn't vanish, but you get stronger. Your tolerance for uncertainty grows. You stop needing to feel ready and start trusting that you'll figure it out along the way. That shift from needing certainty to embracing courage is what changes lives. It's because confidence is built in the doing. It's built when you show up to the gym on day one not knowing what you're doing and you do the reps anyway. It's built when you walk into that meeting unsure if you belong and you speak your truth anyway. It's built every single time you act without a guarantee. That's how confidence is formed, like a muscle. It's repetition, it's resilience, it's earned. Courage is the bridge between where you are and who you want to become. It's not about being reckless, it's about being real. It's about honoring the truth of what you want and being willing to move toward it, even if your hands shake, even if your voice trembles, even if you're the only one who believes in your vision. Because most people won't understand until after you've proven it. But you don't need their permission, you only need your decision. Waiting to feel confident before you act is like waiting to get stronger before you start training. You train to become strong, you act to become confident. And every time you take a step in fear, you take a step into power. You realize that courage was never the absence of fear, it was mastery over it. Not control, not elimination, but a relationship where you acknowledge the fear and move forward anyway. The world doesn't need more people who are sure. It needs more people who are willing. Willing to rise, willing to risk, willing to be seen trying before they have it all figured out. Because that's what leadership looks like. That's what growth demands. Your story is not your destiny. It's your decision that defines you. Too often we get trapped in the narrative of who we've been. We rehearse the same lines, the same limitations, the same identity we picked up years ago, maybe even decades. I've always been this way. That's just who I am. People like me don't get far. These beliefs become our cage. And the longer we live inside them, the more convinced we become that the cage is reality. That belief is the real enemy, not the events of the past. The belief that we are limited, that we are stuck, that who we were determines who we can become. But beliefs can be challenged. Stories can be rewritten. And identity is not fixed, it's chosen. You can wake up today and choose a new direction. You can decide that from this moment forward, you will no longer be defined by what broke you, but by what you build. This isn't about ignoring your past. It's about owning it, learning from it, and refusing to let it control your future. It's about looking at everything you've been through and saying, that shaped me, but it didn't define me. It's about drawing power from your pain rather than letting it dictate your limits. Every powerful person you've ever admired, every leader, every icon, every underdog who made it, they all made a decision to rise, a decision to separate who they were from who they were becoming. They didn't have perfect beginnings. Many of them started in worse places than you. But they chose. They refused to let the story stop there. You can carry the story or you can carry the vision, but you can't carry both. If you want to grow, if you want to change, if you want to break through, you have to choose which voice you'll listen to. The one that tells you it's too late, that you've already failed too many times, that people like you don't get to win, or the one that says, this is just the beginning. This is the moment I reclaim the pen and rewrite what happens next. You're not powerless. You're not too far gone. You're not a victim of your story unless you choose to be. Life is constantly giving you chances to decide again, to rise again, to believe again. The past will only repeat itself if you let it. But the moment you stop letting your history control your future, you begin to unlock the truth that your story has only ever had the meaning you've given. Not perfection creates momentum. That's where so many people get stuck, waiting for the perfect plan, the flawless strategy, the ideal moment. They think everything has to be lined up, every detail figured out, every risk removed before they begin. And while they're waiting, life is moving, opportunities are passing, time is slipping. They confuse preparation with progress, but the truth is, clarity doesn't come from standing still. Step through it, it comes from stepping forward, even if the step is messy. Perfection is the enemy of progress. It's the illusion that you have to get it all right before you deserve to begin. It whispers, don't start until it's safe. Don't move until it's guaranteed, but life doesn't reward the ones who wait. It rewards the ones who move. Because momentum is built in the doing, not the dreaming. You don't need a perfect plan. You need to take imperfect action. You need to put one foot in front of the other again and again until movement becomes motion and motion becomes momentum. Momentum is a powerful force. Once you start building it, everything begins to shift. Doors open, energy rises, confidence grows, but momentum doesn't come from big leaps. It comes from small, consistent steps. It's waking up and choosing to show up even when you're unsure. It's making the call, hitting publish, asking the question. showing up to the gym, saying yes to the opportunity that scares you. Every little action adds to the wave, and over time that wave becomes unstoppable. People wait because they're afraid to fail. They think failure means they're not ready, not capable, not good enough. But failure is part of the process. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up. That's not the problem. The problem is believing that mistakes are proof you should stop. The truth is, every mistake is feedback. Every misstep is a lesson. The only way to know what works is to find out what doesn't. That's how growth happens. Not through theory, but through experience. Waiting for perfection is really just fear in disguise. It's fear pretending to be responsible. But responsibility is not about getting everything right. It's about being accountable enough to take action even when the outcome is uncertain. It's about being brave enough to begin without knowing the whole path, because the path only becomes clear through motion. You discover your strength, your direction, your rhythm by moving, not by overthinking. The people who make things happen in this world are not the ones with the best ideas. They're the ones who take the most action. They move fast, they adjust quickly. They fail forward. They don't waste time trying to be perfect. They focus on being in motion, because when you're in motion, you're in the game, you're learning, you're evolving, you're gaining ground even when it doesn't look perfect. Momentum isn't about speed, it's about consistency. It's about stacking small wins, showing up when it's hard, and building the habit of progress. It's knowing that every action counts even when no one sees it, especially when no one sees it, because that's where discipline is born, that's where resilience is built, and that's where transformation begins. You don't need to have it all figured out, you just need to begin. You need to take the first step, then the next. And as you do, something powerful happens. You stop thinking like a spectator and start living like a creator. You stop analyzing and start building. You stop waiting and start becoming. You were not born to play small. Own your power. That feeling inside you, the one that tells you there's more to life than what you're currently living, it's not wrong. It's not unrealistic. It's a reminder. A reminder that something inside you is greater than your circumstances, bigger than your fear, louder than the voices that told you to be quiet, to play nice, to not want too much. You weren't made to shrink so others could be comfortable. Go. You weren't born to dim your light so no one feels insecure around your brilliance. But somewhere along the way, you forgot. Maybe it was a teacher who told you to be more realistic. Maybe it was a parent who was too afraid to dream and passed that fear down to you. Maybe it was a failure that knocked the wind out of you, and you decided it was safer to play small than risk getting hurt again. So you made yourself smaller. You lowered your standards. You stopped asking for more, not because you didn't want it, but because somewhere deep down you started to believe you didn't deserve it. That's the lie, that's the trap, that's the cage so many people live in. This quiet, suffocating belief that who they are is not enough to go after what they want, and so they settle, they blend in, they follow the path that's expected, not the one that calls to their soul. But the truth is, you've always had power. You've always had something in you that was meant to lead, to inspire, to build, to create, to live a life that turns heads and leaves a mark. Owning your power doesn't mean being arrogant. It doesn't mean thinking you're better than others. It means recognizing that your voice matters, that your dreams are valid, that your desires are not selfish, they're sacred. They're signals from your highest self calling you to rise. When you own your power, you stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop asking for permission to be great. You stop waiting for someone to choose you, and you start choosing yourself. There will always be people who try to keep you in the box they've built for you, people who feel threatened by your growth, who are more comfortable with a version of you that was unsure and afraid. But your job is not to make others comfortable. It's to become who you were born to be. And the more you own your power, the more you give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror, a reminder that greatness is not for the chosen few, it's for the ones who choose it. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to raise your voice. You're allowed to show up with fire in your eyes and conviction in your chest. You're allowed to walk into a room like you belong there because you do. You were not designed for mediocrity. You were not built to stay small. You were given this life, this breath, this heart for a reason, and that reason was never to play it safe. Rock bottom is where the noise stops. The opinions, the expectations, the distractions, they all fall away. What's left is the truth, the raw, unfiltered truth about who you are, what matters to you, and what you're willing to fight for. You stop pretending, you stop performing, you stop trying to impress people who were never meant to understand you, and in that silence you hear something you haven't heard in a long time. Your own voice. The one that says, this isn't the end, this is where I rise. There's a brutal kind of freedom that comes with losing it all. It's painful, it's humbling, but it's also clarifying. Because when you're stripped of everything you thought you needed, when you're standing there with nothing but your will, you discover what you're really made of. You see the grit, the resilience, the fight that was buried under comfort and routine. And you realize that maybe you weren't truly living before. Maybe you were just surviving, just existing, just following the script someone else wrote. Rock bottom breaks the script. It demands a rewrite. It hands you a blank page and says, now what will you do? And that's where transformation begins. Not in the comfort zone, not on the mountaintop, but in the ashes. That's where you find your edge, your hunger, your reason. That's where you stop settling for what's easy and start reaching for what's real. You don't rise from rock bottom by going back to who you were. You rise by becoming someone new. There's a version of you on the other side of this pain that you haven't even met yet. A version who is stronger, wiser, bolder. A version who doesn't just survive setbacks but uses them as fuel. That version is forged in adversity. Built in the dark, sculpted by every moment that tried to break you and failed. And the only way to meet that version is to keep moving, to keep choosing, to keep building, even when it hurts.